Hello and welcome to this special End of Year Around the World programme from London, where we take a look back at the main events of 2022. On February the 24th, after months of speculation, Russia's President Vladimir Putin announced what he called a special military operation in Ukraine.
За последние несколько недель, как вы знаете, рядом западных стран.
In a televised address on Russian state TV, Putin said Russia had been left with no choice but to defend itself against what he said were threats emanating from modern Ukraine. It amounted to a full-scale invasion of the country. Armoured vehicles were soon seen crossing the Crimea-Ukraine checkpoint into Ukraine's Kherson region. And missiles and bombs were captured on camera throughout the country, including the capital, Kyiv. Throughout the rest of the year, scenes of brutality were broadcast around the world, as both countries suffered casualties in the hundreds of thousands and millions of people were displaced. In the months that followed, NATO countries individually sent tens of billions of dollars to support Ukraine with both weapons and humanitarian aid. Following Volodymyr Zelensky's first overseas trip since the war started, President Joe Biden signed a funding bill that included a further $47 billion in additional aid for Ukraine.
Ukraine will never be a victory for Russia, for free people refused to live in a world of hopelessness and darkness. We will have a different future, a brighter future, rooted in democracy and principles, hope and light, of decency and dignity, of freedom and possibilities. For God's sake, this man cannot remain in power.
March saw the 94th Academy Awards and the now infamous moment of Will Smith walking on stage and slapping comedian Chris Rock across the face after he had joked about his wife, Jada Pinkett Smith.
Up top, everybody! Let me get everybody up top!
In the days that followed, Smith issued a formal apology on Instagram and Facebook. He referred to his behaviour as unacceptable and inexcusable. In April, Smith was banned from attending the Oscars or any other Academy event for 10 years. Business magnate Elon Musk initiated the acquisition of American social media company Twitter on April the 14th and concluded it on October the 27th. Musk began buying Twitter shares in January 2022, eventually becoming the company's largest shareholder by April with a 9.1% ownership stake. Twitter's board unanimously accepted Musk's buyout offer of $44 billion on April the 25th. In the months that followed the sale, Mr. Musk began making sweeping changes to the company, including massive job cuts. In May, there was yet another mass shooting in the United States. 18-year-old Salvador Ramos walked into his former elementary school in Uvalde, Texas, and fatally shot 19 students and 2 teachers and wounded 17 others.
Breaking my heart. I mean, I want to cry for each and every student. I remember when it happened, I was home in Massachusetts, and it was just so heartbreaking to see what those families went through and what those children went through all that time waiting to be rescued. I don't understand. But I don't understand any of these school shootings. They all just make my heart break each time I hear about it. Gun control, I don't even know where to start with it. What's the answer?
A report into the shooting found systemic failures and egregiously poor decision-making by those involved in the response. Nearly 400 officers rushed to the site, but police waited over an hour to confront the attacker. The Committee of State Legislators highlighted a lack of leadership and urgency, describing a lackadaisical approach by authorities at the scene. In June, a US jury found that Amber Heard had defamed her ex-husband Johnny Depp with an article in which she claimed she was a victim of domestic abuse.
As against John C. Depp II, we, the jury, award compensatory damages in the amount of $2 million. As against John C. Depp II, we, the jury, award punitive damages in the amount of $0.
Jurors awarded Mr. Depp, who denied abusing Miss Heard, $15 million in compensatory and punitive damages. Her team have now asked for the jury's verdict to be reversed or for a new trial entirely. July saw shocking scenes from Japan, where the country's longest-serving Prime Minister Shinzo Abe was shot and killed during a campaign rally. The former Prime Minister was shot at close range while making a speech in Nara in the west of the country. He was taken to hospital by helicopter, but doctors were unable to save him. Police arrested a 41-year-old man shortly after the attack. There was shock and disbelief in Japan, which has low rates of violent crime and tough gun laws. On August the 15th, 6 days after the polls closed, Kenya's Electoral Commission unveiled the name of the new president, William Ruto, who defeated Raila Odinga with 50.49% of the vote. Odinga, supported by several members of the Electoral Commission, contested the electoral victory, but the Supreme Court eventually confirmed the vote. Thousands of Russians filed past the open casket of Mikhail Gorbachev, the last leader of the Soviet Union. Gorbachev, leader of the Soviet Union from 1985 to 1991, died on August the 30th, aged 91. He was buried without state honours or President Vladimir Putin in attendance. His body lay in state in the Grand Hall of Columns in central Moscow, in tradition of previous Soviet leaders, including Vladimir Lenin and Joseph Stalin, while Muscovites lined up outside to pay their last respects. Outgoing British Prime Minister Boris Johnson was applauded by staff as he left Downing Street for the last time on September the 6th, after he was forced to resign following a series of scandals.
In only a couple of hours, I will be in Balmoral to see Her Majesty the Queen. And the torch will finally be passed to a new Conservative leader.
He was later replaced by Liz Truss, who beat Rishi Sunak in a vote of party members, but she only lasted 44 days in the job, making her the shortest-serving leader in UK history. Former Chancellor Rishi Sunak ended a turbulent year in UK politics as Prime Minister.
I want to pay tribute to my predecessor, Liz Truss. She was not wrong to want to improve growth in this country. It is a noble aim. And I admired her restlessness to create change. But some mistakes were made. Not born of ill will or bad intentions. Quite the opposite, in fact. But mistakes nonetheless. And I have been elected as leader of my party and your Prime Minister, in part, to fix them. And that work begins immediately.
Days later, and Queen Elizabeth's family members rushed to be by the side of Britain's 96-year-old monarch in Balmoral after doctors announced there were concerns for her health. Later that day, the palace announced Queen Elizabeth had died peacefully at her home in Scotland. Landmarks around the world, from Sydney to Paris, were lit up or went dark in tribute to the Queen.
I'm feeling up and down, sad, joyful.
I've been retired 10 years and I'm loving it. I'm sure it's very
And it's a very precious place to come to. And the nation wants to be here. So there's a joint of sadness but also celebration.
Britain entered a period of national mourning. The new King Charles III greeted mourners as he travelled around the country in the days following. The Queen Queen's funeral and her final procession were watched by millions of people around the world. Hundreds of thousands flocked to central London to pay their respects to Britain's longest-serving monarch. Italians went to the polls on September the 25th in an election that returned the country's most right-wing government since World War II and paved the way for Giorgia Meloni to become its first female prime minister.
Però quando stanotte sarà passata, quando questa notte sarà passata.
经过艰苦卓绝的努力
In October, Xi Jinping was confirmed as leader of China for a president-breaking third term after a week-long political meeting eliminated key rivals and strengthened his political power. The 20th Party Congress, the most important meeting of the ruling Chinese Communist Party five-year political cycle, saw about 2,400 delegates gather in Beijing to rubber stamp major reshuffles and constitutional changes. Egypt hosted the 27th UN Climate Change Conference of the parties in November. It was the first time the international event dedicated to the fight against global warming was organised on the African continent, which has been severely affected by rising temperatures. Particularly devastating floods caused the deaths of several hundred people in Nigeria, but also in Chad, Niger and South Africa in 2022. After difficult discussions, negotiations reached a deal at COP27 to compensate the most vulnerable countries for the damage caused by climate change.
And so today I'm announcing that I will convene a Climate Ambition Summit in September 2023. I call on every leader to step up, from governments, businesses, cities and regions, civil society and finance. They must come with new, tangible and credible climate action to accelerate the pace of change. The invitation is open, but there is a price of entry, and the price of entry is non-negotiable. Credible, serious and new climate action and nature-based solutions that will move the needle forward and respond to the urgency of the climate crisis must be presented. It will be a no-nonsense summit, no exceptions, no compromises. And there will be no room for backsliders, greenwashers, blame shifters, or repackaging of announcements of previous years.
In early December, 25 people were arrested in raids across Germany on suspicion of plotting to overthrow the government. A man named as Heinrich XIII from an old aristocratic family is alleged to have been central to the plans of the group. The group of far-right and ex-military figures are said to have prepared to storm the parliament building, the Reichstag, and seize power. In an unprecedented feat for an African or Arab team, Morocco made World Cup history by reaching the semi-finals of the prestigious tournament in Qatar. Victorious in the quarter-finals against Portugal, then eliminated by France, the team took fourth place. Following their historic performance, the players were rapturously applauded by tens of thousands of supporters when they returned home. And in the final days of December, the man often known as the greatest footballer of all time, Pelé, died at the age of 82.
Pelé, the 17-year-old wonder. Pelé always wanting the ball, always calling for it. Game with that centre from Santos, and here comes Pelé in the last minute. It's 5-2 for Brazil. And now watch Pelé, number 10, always the master and the scorer of goal number 3.
He's currently Brazil's joint top scorer with 77 goals in 92 games. At club level, he was Santos's all-time top scorer with 643 goals in 659 games. The only player to win the World Cup 3 times, lifting the trophy in 1958, 1962 and 1970. Pelé was named FIFA's Player of the Century in the year 2000.
And what he has done, not just winning, 3 World Cups, like you say, well, how difficult it is. It's just the contribution and goals, and it was, I think, it was a new thing when he came up. But I was not born when he was playing, but it's like a good movie, no? With the legacy, when after many, many years still we are talking about him, still are talking about a good movie, a good book, is because you were so good.
And that was 2022, a year that will be remembered for a brutal and prolonged war in Ukraine, for the death of Britain's longest reigning monarch, and a year where the world emerged from COVID lockdowns. And like 2022, we'll be with you for the biggest stories in 2023. From everyone here at Channels TV, have a very happy New Year.